Welcome to Drive Time Exchange. As rubber hits the road, hard talk meets great music. Monday to Thursday, 4 to 6 p.m. on Nett Radio, taking you above and beyond.
From Ohio, spending holiday in Scarborough. Time up here, want to go. Why, brother, I really don't know. Immigration told the old man, you know I prohibited immigrants. Listen, sire, the time expire. We would like to know where you really want. He said, all them Tobago girl, tick, tick, tick like a new sponge ball. Them formation hall, easy at all, pretty as a doll. Me, I love them sweet Tobago girl. West, north and south, I have seen women all about, but they cannot compare with these you have done here. When they walk in, background shaking, pretty teeth and eyes that just seem to glow. What they eating, what they drinking, how them looking, so I would like to know. All them Tobago girls, sweet, sweet, sweet like a queso.
Well, everybody, good day to you, and of course, welcome to it. Good to have you here. And if you're wondering where here is, this is New Era TT Radio. We are streaming to you on newerattradio.com. And you can also pick us up on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And we are also streaming right now on New Era TT Radio. And you can also get us on TuneIn. As we welcome you all to the Drive Time Exchange right here on the frequency. With none other than our journalist extraordinaire, Tony Fraser. Tony, good day to you. How are you doing?
I am good, Chalo. And how are you going?
Check your and see if you're muted.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about the work of a Tobago girl. I'm not sure that she would like to be referred to in the context that Sparrow referred to her. But we're not responsible for that, right? What we can say is that she's a bright, I am sure she will prefer this description at this point, to be a bright Tobago woman, capable, qualified, and so on and so on, because she's responsible for proposing the Tobago element of the budget. And as you know, the time frame is different, so that the Tobago proposed budget comes out before the national budget, and for a reason also to indicate as to the requirements of Tobago, the ambitions of Tobago, the projects that they are proposing, and of course the fiscal measures for Tobago. And that is the discussion for this afternoon. And we have three persons who are going to engage in that discussion. Incidentally, forgot to call the lady's name. She's Petalan Roberts. She's the secretary responsible for financial matters in the Tobago House of Assembly, and she has made her proposals. And let me just deal with some headline statements coming out of her presentation. The focus, according to her, the development focus, which is a critical element. Of course, the recurrent expenditure is important, what the government has to pay for, and so on and so on. But beyond and above that, expenditure is important, what the government has to pay for, and so on and so on. But beyond and above that, expenditure is important, what the government has to pay for, and so on and so on. But beyond and above that, expenditure is important.
Although we have a little bit of a
has to pay for
rerunning of what I said.
but beyond and above that, expenditure is important.
Although we have a little bit of a
has to. All right, we're back on track now, Charles. The technical thing gets in the way sometimes, and I'm sure that's
yeah,
it.
we are.
We're back on track.
It does.
Yeah. Okay. So as I was indicating, the Secretary for Finance in the Tobago House of Assembly, Peterland Roberts, outlined some measures on focusing on the development elements of the program, the budget, the proposed budget. She's talking about tourism, the focus on tourism, agriculture, infrastructure development, digital technology, human capital development, and so on. So those are some of the major elements of what has been proposed. And what we're going to do now, we have gathered some people who are very interested, very involved in economic development in Tobago. We have Dr. Thomas James, who is once again with us, and he always responds positively when I reach out to him and say, come and help us with some matters relating to Tobago and generally economic development. Thanks again, Dr. James. We have Curtis Williams, who is the president of the Tobago division of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Welcome to the program, sir. And we also have a hotelier, Rennie Sipasad Singh, and to deal, I presume, with the tourism element of what has been proposed. So let us go first to Curtis Williams, because I know he cannot stay for the entire program. So we give him an opportunity to, as it were, make his statements before he has to leave us. You heard the outline, and I'm sure that you're fully aware of the elements proposed in the developmental element of the budget statement. Your reaction to it?
Tony, good afternoon to all your viewers and listeners. It's a pleasure joining you guys here. The rest of the panelists, Dr. Dennis James, and my good friend from the Hotel Association, Rennie Sipasad. Popping out at me, I was there at the chamber, and popping out at me during her presentation, and then we looking forward to the business aspect of it, the SME, was one thing that we lobby for as a chamber, which was the government, the THA loan guarantee program. And that's something that we have been lobbying for the last couple of years with the THA. My past president and vice president sat nights upon nights speaking with the then finance secretary, which was the chief secretary, coming up with a plan to assist small business in Tobago coming out of the COVID. We were struggling with working capital. And then when we faced the bank was looking at us because we didn't have, most of the business didn't have any security to cover some of the loans portfolio that they were looking forward to. So with this loan guarantee program that the THA put in place, this will help the SMEs on the island a great much, really help them. I mean, today we have a big meeting that we're going to treat with the details of this program. And I mean, Tony, the hall is full. There's no room for anyone else. And the amount of business in Tobago that is struggling and really need a program of this nature, and I think this was a big thing that stand out in her budget statement. We want to move directly into another part that was much interesting.
Sorry, before you run, can you tell our listeners, our viewers, something of the nature, it doesn't have to be details, something of the nature of the programs that the Tobago Chamber wants to promote?
Well, definitely. So the Tobago House of Assembly loan guarantee program, it's a program that will assist small business throughout the island. And this program, I mean, initially they're going to start off at, I think it's 12 to $15 million. It's going to be a rolling fund. More funds is going to be injected into the program. And there are a couple banks log on onto the program so far. We have Republic Bank, we have Scotia Bank.
Sorry, the question is, what is the nature of these businesses that are going to be promoted and financed?
Well, I love how it is open. It's open to all class of business in Tobago, because there were some programs that ran before that was only focused on tourism, business within the tourism industry. But this program will focus on all industry in Tobago, which gives everyone a pinch of the pie. And I think that speaks volume for us. It speaks a lot of volume for us.
Will retailers be able to cash in on the program also?
Yeah, retail business, the agriculture, those into construction, those into other business, service-oriented business, those into tourism as well, because we have a lot of tourism hoteliers that is willing to get in and get into these programs, and so I'm happy about that aspect of the program, and I think the chamber have worked tirelessly to get this kind of a guarantee. That I knew the government had one, but it was a little robust. It was, and so some of the members here, the small businesses in Tobago, could not have come on board with the government program. And then the government program, the funds ran out. So the Tobago-centric business didn't have the opportunity to log in onto that program. So that was the biggest takeaway for us here at the chamber. We felt that was a really good thing to start with.
Okay. I'm allowing you to continue because I know you have to leave. I hope you could persuade you to stay for the whole show. The talk gets so nice that you don't want to move, but
no, it's really exciting. The other thing that banter about, and I mean, I know Dr. James will talk more about this one. It was the formation of the Tobago development. They wanted to be a bank, but for some strange reason, they couldn't get the word bank, so they used the word fund. And the idea behind the Tobago Development Fund was to look at businesses that are willing to scale up. There are a lot of businesses in Tobago that are willing to scale up and don't have the wherewithal to scale up that business. And
what do you mean by scale up? You know, we play these terms, but we have ordinary people listening and viewing. So give them an idea of what you mean by scale up.
So when we say scale up, there may be some guest houses or even small hotels on the island like want to move from, because now I know we have tourism is a big trust with us. We have a new terminal building and we expect to have some new airlift coming in soon. And with that now you have your probably a 5-room or your 10-room hotel, and you want to scale, you want to move up to 15 rooms, 20 rooms. You want to put on additional rooms, and you don't have that capital injection to do that, or you may be you may be doing car rentals, and you want to move from your 5 cars to 10 cars, or you want to move from your 10 cars to 15 cars. And those are the scaling up. That's what we meant by scaling up. You want to move the business to a next tier, that will maximize on the kind of business that coming forward to you. But you don't have the capital to do so. You don't have the wherewithal. You're having challenges facing the banking institution, because you know a development bank, the strategy, the idea behind a development bank is to work with you. Is different from a normal bank that will give you a fixed loan and tell you, okay, that's it. Let's fashion it to the Agricultural Development Bank. So you see how your Agricultural Development Bank would work with the farmers. Is the same thing the Tobago Development Fund, or supposed to be bank, will be working with the business as they're scaling up the business, as the business move to the next level. That company would have been a merger of the 2 units that Tobago also Assembly had under the Division of Finance, which was the BDU, the Business Development Unit, and also the Venture Capital. As we all know, venture capital that is phasing out a bit in the spheres of the law. So now the venture capital will do equity financing, and that company now can get into your business now and buy shares within your business, give you the necessary needed funding, and when your business reaches to a level, they will purchase the shares back from you. And they were able to bring expertise onto your board. They were able to bring technical expertise onto your board and really share in some of the things that you may want to move forward with and move that shift of technical knowledge into the space. So that's what the development fund will be doing, and there are more to it. And I know they're going to roll out that whole development fund company. It started, and the entire thing will be rolled out sooner or later, and we'll hear more about it. And Tony, those things kind of trigger something happening in the space, and we in the business committee, we are excited on these two things popping up. Those two things pop out at us because these things were something we spoke about on numerous occasions under the business committee, that because the bank on the island was not giving us the support that we so desire. So we were happy that we could get the desire coming out from the THA and the budget statement.
Give our listeners and viewers an indication of the quantum that has been allocated for the development fund as opposed to the recurrent expenditure you pay in civil servants, etc., etc. How significant it is to be spread around amongst all of the developmental projects?
Well, it was estimated that the development projects would have been $1 billion for development. That's what she reckoned. And recurrent would have been 2.71. And then the entire package would have been 3.71, which she asks is actually 5.9% of the national pie. She estimated the national pie to be $6.3 billion, $63.5 billion. But again, due to the times, and we can see the times that's happening now, this financing funding becomes a very tricky thing. So it's optimistical that the 5.9%, if we may get it, that's the lowest part she asked for. We know that we may not get it, as well as we may get it, and but it's what is desire, and it's what's going forward in terms of her plan. I look forward
what's the dollar figure for the 5.9%?
5.9%. That would have been the lower end of it, of 63.5. That's roughly well, her ask is $3.71 billion.
Okay, it's 3.7 billion then.
Yeah,
all right.
3.7 billion. Yeah.
Right, let me go to Rennie Sipasad Singh, who is in the tourism business. He's the vice president of the Tourism Association in Tobago, and give us an appreciation of the thinking and the responses of the tourism industry with regard to the proposed budget statement the proposed budget revenue hopeful by the THA secretary.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dr. James, and my colleague from the chamber. Well, I mean, numbers are one thing. That's really what you're going to apply the numbers for. I mean, Chamber would have spoken extensively just now about the funding, which of course is critical, it's important. It has been part of the landscape in different iterations for many, many years. We had grants, which were used primarily, if I'm talking from a tourism perspective, to assist properties to upgrade, because many properties did not have the funding. And even pre-pandemic, when Tobago started to see a decline in its tourism arrivals, and of course, pandemic didn't help. People didn't have funds to upgrade the properties, and what happens is that the product in Tobago started to decline. And I mean, it's no secret that to upgrade the properties, the actual physical product, I'm talking about the hotel product, started to decline. Some of the sites and so forth in Tobago is well behind what you're seeing in a lot of the other destinations. The problem that was created is that commercial banks in general did not have an appetite for Tobago. To be quite frank, Tobago was not seen as a sound investment. And that generally is a reflection of public policy and private sector policy, right? Banks go where they think they're going to get a return on their money. So I guess the government in their thinking is considering, look, if we do guarantees and we do the type of financing in the format that the chamber mentioned, it may give some breathing room to allow some seed funding, because the type of money we're talking about, $150 million and so forth, really is not a large sum of money in the scheme of things for the needs of just the business sector and the tourism sector in Tobago. But I mean, it's a start. What you find is that a lot of commercial banks in Trinidad will do financing for hotel projects or hospitality projects of all the islands, save and except Tobago. Even Trinidad, they do it. You have about 4 large-scale hotel projects in the pipeline in Trinidad, and they're all done by local banking, the banking sector. That has not applied in Tobago. So this, I suppose, this initiative, by doing the type of funding that the THA is proposing, certainly will afford mainly the medium and small accommodation providers and hospitality businesses, characters, and so forth, to get some funding to upgrade the facilities, because you can't compete with the other islands unless your actual facilities are comparative in any form. So that we don't have any issue with. They did identify in the budget speech some particular projects which are really sites and attractions. For example, you'd have seen the upgrade of Store B facility, 15 million. I mean, these numbers, of course, would have had to be done by THA. I can't speak to exactly the actual numbers. They would have had to done their calculations. Transportation of the Blue Food Festival home, beautification of Scarborough. I mean, all of these things, the beach facility, Pier and Jetty at Luido. I mean, all of these, of course, are notable projects that certainly any destination should always ensure. The state has a responsibility to ensure they're maintained and they're up to standard. So, of course, those are welcome. They're also looking at, they have identified this time around some key areas where they're looking to develop parts of the tourism sector, artist development, yard project, Tobago Carnival. So these are the festival areas. And those are important. In fact, Tony, very recently, in fact, about a week ago, we have a new board in the Hotel Association. We've only been there about a month. And we met with the Secretary of Tourism. And one of our concerns was that while the THA may have in its projections, what it intends to do is really critical that you have dialogue with the private sector as well and stakeholders, because we can give you some input as to what may be feasible, viable, what may be necessary. Trends, the world changes, and especially in tourism, very rapidly. I mean, just a day or two ago, we were dealing with a war in the Middle East. And all of these things have impacts on travel trends and how people. So it's a very fluid industry. And coming out of that, there was an agreement that Tobago does actually need its own tourism plan, marketing plan, a tourism development plan, a living and breathing document, yes. And when you have that, and you have to know where you're going. People use the word tourism very generously, but tourism in Tobago is not necessarily tourism in another destination. And we have to be careful that we don't do something that does not suit what the destination Tobago can facilitate. We're not going to be a Dominican Republic, for example, right? So we can't just say tourism in the simplest sense. But I mean, the $150 million certainly is necessary, because you may or may not be aware, Dr. James may know, but TTAL, which is the agency that markets Tobago, doesn't have any money. And that has more or less been the case as far back as April. And there are a lot of tourism initiatives that need to take place, marketing, promotion, trade shows, and so forth, that need to be financed, airlift, and there was no funding. So some of that funding certainly would help and ease the burden, because if you don't do these things within a particular time period, you essentially lose a year of marketing and promotion. Mm-hmm. So it was timely. I mean, we certainly support it. But again, the devil is in the details. We'll have to review the document and have further dialogue with the THA to see how best we can utilize this funding, not only to sustain the industry, upgrade the industry, but also attract investment. Because Tobago does need investment. We've just built a huge airport. A lot of product is decrepit and in dire need of repair. And if we are to be competitive, these things have to be looked at.
Right. Okay, so let's go now to Dr. Vanessa James, economist, to get, some of the elements of the development program have been articulated. And of course, the chunk of the money, as identified, will go to recurrent expenditure, to pay salaries, to purchase materials, etc., etc. And I'm sure you'll have your say on that. But give our listeners and viewers a kind of overall appreciation of the budget statement and whether or not you think it is approaching the kind of direction that is required to enhance Tobago's economic development.
Hello, Tony and Renee and
It is.
and my good friend Curtis Williams. Well, I look at the budget in a little different way than the business community in principle, because although I'm a businessman myself, I practice my profession by selling services to the world to this day. And the services I sell are services that are designed to help a society think beyond survival mode. So when I listen to Curtis, I hear, well, we want help to survive in this kind of economy that we have. Same for Rennie. But if you are studying Tobago the way I do, looking from 1884 to now, or from 1898 to now, what you see is a situation that needs genuine development policies, programs to move the agenda beyond mere survival in a dependent, underdeveloped state. So it's not enough for the society to say, we're happy if government gives me work in CPEP or URP. It's not enough for the business community to say, well, if you give us some small loans, we'll survive and we could make progress and so on. What Tobago really needs now is a proper development program anchored on a viable, well-designed development banking facility that could push it from the state where it is into the stratosphere of development. And I want to characterize the state where we are properly for your public, so you could understand what the proper answer to your question about development is all about. The economy of Tobago, if you take the data provided by the secretary in her proposal, you will see some interesting things that Curtis wouldn't look for or anyone would look for. First of all, let's begin with the 5.9% of 63.5 million. The argument in the document is that the 5.9% represents the minimum share Tobago should get on the basis of its population share of the national population. Now, the national population is 1.37 million if you use the latest intercensus data provided by the CSO. That implies 5.9% of that figure is 80,172 persons living in Tobago. Now, I don't know if Renee agrees that that is the scale of the population in Tobago. It makes no sense to me as a man studying Tobago all these years, but that's what the secretary says is the population, effectively, by her assumptions. Now, if that population is true, and if it is true that, as the secretary said in her document, the output of Tobago in 2024 was $1.71 billion. Then what it means is that the output per person of Tobago in 2024 was $3,115 US. That's 13.3% below where it was in 2021 when we kicked out the PNM from office. What does that tell you? It explains why Curtis is talking about the business community struggling. Because the economy of Tobago in this last 3.5 years almost virtually collapsed. And when you look at the data that's published underneath that figure, you see evidence of it everywhere in agriculture and all dimensions of agriculture. In the only part of the economy in Tobago that really didn't collapse, well, really were two parts. The credit unions grew while the banks declined, and declined in the volume of services they were willing to provide. So Curtis is right that the banking sector withdrew effectively. Even insurance declined substantially in Tobago. But what the division is calling tourism has two elements: hotels and guest houses and so on, plus restaurants and retail and wholesale activity. Now, you and I live in Tobago, and you know retail and wholesale activity, the vast majority of it in Tobago has very little or nothing to do with tourism. So you really have to be careful what you are saying when you say that tourism grew. But nevertheless, the evidence provided by the division is that that agglomeration that they call tourism grew. Most of that could very well not be tourism at all, but let's go with the calculation. The general point I'm drawing to your attention is that you have a collapsed economy. That's a collapse at the tail end of 127 years of deep economic crisis in Tobago after the twinning with Trinidad. Now, how do you get from there to a state where you could pay your own way? Let me also give you an additional piece of data from the document. When you ask for $3.71 billion of funding, you have to, if you are a responsible society and a responsible government in Tobago, you have to match that against the $1.71 billion that you're saying the economy is producing. You could see that it's 2.4 times the amount of money you're asking the government to transfer to Tobago. Is 2.4 times the total output being produced in Tobago. And Tobagonians need to wake up and ponder on it. Because if you have $1.71 billion of output, and you tax that at the standard rate of the country, which is 29% overall, the total tax take against the GDP, Tobago could only fund $498 million of that $3.71 billion. We are asking Trinidad to fund, not Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad to fund 87% of the requests from the THA. Mm-hmm. That tells you that you have to be extremely careful as a society when you calculate your development requirements and seek to put a proper program in place. Not any and every program could help you if you're running a place like Tobago. You may be able to get away with what Curtis is saying he's satisfied with, but that's survival money. When you're talking development, it's a whole different ballgame. And let me clarify the nature of that just quickly. I don't want to take up all your time, but I just want to observe for the public.
I just want Curtis to respond to you before he takes off. But go ahead, man. Make your final point.
Yeah, when you think carefully about what you're dealing with, the nature of the development proposals you have to put forward, you have to cater for a number of facts. Almost everybody working in the teaching and central government in underemployment conditions, CPEP, URP, clerical work, what have you. Productivity in the THA is the lowest in Tobago, lower than Curtis's businesses. You want to develop Tobago, you need a two-part program. One part has to be about growing productivity in the THA because the vast majority of its workers are underemployed. And the second part is that you have to get into the business of investing in a particular kind of tourism that will move your output per person from the 3,115 all the way up. First, you have to catch up with the country. That's 14,004. You have to set up the program to catch up with the country. And then you have to set up the program in a way that helps the country diversify away from the crisis that we have created for ourselves by holding on to oil and gas forevermore. Amen. That kind of programming is a very different programming to what I see in this document.
We're going to allow you to develop that. But if I could see if I could summarize one of the points that you're making is that the level of requests does not match, or put it the other way around, the production that comes out of the economy of Tobago. Am I reading you correctly?
The nature of the programming being proposed to the country doesn't match the nature of the problem you're trying to solve in Tobago.
Yeah.
And the nature of the problem the country has to solve across the board, because overall the nation has to get out of the mess we are in by depending excessively on oil and gas. Everybody knows that.
Yeah. All right, Curtis Williams, your response to Dr. James.
Well, Dr. James and I, we spoke about these things on lengthy occasions, and we actually on the same pathway. What I've said, what I have spoke about earlier on, those were the low hanging fruits. When we need to really put the island on a trajectory of moving in a particular direction, we definitely have to look at some sustainable industry, and we have tourism. But what aspect of tourism will we be speaking about? We can take tourism and market it, but we have to choose what aspect of it we want to market. So we have cultural tourism, we have all these sites, and so we can look at all the historical sites. There are things that we could look at sport tourism. We could even look at medical tourism. Tobago is right for us to develop the tourism plan in a holistic manner, but just take into consideration some of the natural things we have here. But in doing that, Tony, everybody has to be on board. We have to have the population of Tobago, the people who reside here, understanding what the country vision is all about and the direction the country want to move into. And with that effort now, it has to be an everybody effort. We have to have the buy-in from all the villages, from Charleville, Dollarford, Castara. We have to have everybody buying into that idea, that vision, that we're going to move to be in a particular direction, and then we will all start working in one synergy going forward. Other than that, it don't work.
One of my concerns with regard to what you talked about, the funding of all of the small and medium-sized projects, is that, and I think I asked you about it, is that they are going into trading and really not contributing to the kind of economic growth that Dr. James talked about, that the country, and the country meaning Trinidad and Tobago in this instance, requires. Because if you are setting up more and more buy and sell arrangements, and that is not something, I'm not saying that is something peculiar to Tobago. You go all over Trinidad. Sometimes my wife carries me to these big warehouses to buy this and that, and the whole place is packed with Chinese products and Japanese products and so on. And there's money going down the drain. So that when you talked about funding these small and medium-sized businesses, and I'm not against the small and medium-sized businesses, like the larger businesses in Tobago, almost completely dependent on trading. I don't know if we're going anywhere with that.
Well, Tony, there were some other aspects that we were looking at, because we spoke about the food import bill, and we see the food import bill is really, really high, especially in Tobago. We import a lot of stuff here. We have the love now for berries, all the berries we love. Strawberry pie. I mean, you take it, strawberry, blackberry, raspberry, all the berries we like. And we're now looking at the local stuff. We have the local foods, the pomsity, the mangoes, and all these other things that we could do. So pushing the agriculture sector, in which the secretary spoke about the mega farms and how it's important for us to look at agriculture in a meaningful way and not agriculture as a side thing. And, we have to make agriculture a little more sexy so that the younger folks coming into agriculture must understand that this is not somebody who wearing old clothes and bust up shoes and they're retiring their head. They have to understand that agriculture could be a more meaningful industry going forward. There need to be some enabling aspect of it going forward. They spoke about the mega farms and the amount of funding going towards it. Because if we start to grow and we start to produce in Tobago, we can reduce that food import bill, and that would now have some effect on the inflation rate in Tobago. So that's another area in which a lot of energy can be spent from the Tobago House of Assembly end to really kind of capitalize on that area. Now, as I mentioned, Tony, remember, the sectors we spoke about in the funding is not only the retail sector, we talk about all the industries. So we spoke about the tourism industry, we spoke about the agro-processing industry. So all these are the ones that are going to be, being assisted with this funding that coming forward. Again, this is the low-hanging fruit, and the sustainable plan going forward will take in consideration what Dr. James spoke about, and it must be done in a holistic manner, and getting the players involved in it, getting all the players and the people is the most important part of this whole scenario. If we don't have the people buying in it, Tony, it just ain't gonna work. It definitely
But
won't.
may I draw your attention to something here, both Curtis, Tony, and Andre. Curtis's heart may be in the right direction. But if I am to be guided by the document that I spent the last 2 days studying, he doesn't have in the THA the technical expertise required to translate his dreams into a proper plan and a proper budget to start the process of rolling. So if you look at this document, you would see a document in which René's tourism activity is just one of 21 priorities. I'm the only person in Trinidad and Tobago, and maybe in the whole Caribbean, with a PhD in economic planning and budget. And I can tell you, that's complete nonsense. It's an abuse of the English language to talk about 20. How do you build a budget with 21 priorities? It makes absolutely no sense. When I model the Trinidad and Tobago economy, which I am doing now for the UN as part of the way I work for them, I generate a model which captures all the interdependencies in the system. And when you do that properly, you will be able to put your finger on 3 or 4 factors, which if you change them, they change the whole system. That's what you're talking about when you talk about priorities. And we've understood them for decades, since Arthur Lewis won his Nobel Prize. You have to do things to boost the profit rate and the savings rate of businesses. That's one. When you read this document, you see no sign of that. The second thing that you have to do, if you're going to do it, is you have to do what Curtis and René are talking about. You have to really industrialize tourism in the sense that if you want to move tourism from the 14% they say it contributes now to the 20% they want, you have to answer deep questions like what Curtis is hinting at. What kind of tourism? It won't be bringing people to Tobago to go to the beach. You have to be heading down the road where St. Kitts Nevis, when they were in the same situation we were in after the collapse of their sugar in the last 30 years, they decided in the right way to head down the road of what I recommended when I came to Tobago in 1997. You have to go down the road of the production of the high quality exportable services on the tourism platform. That's what they're doing. That's what the Bahamas did. That's what Cayman did. That's what Bermuda done. Those are the only 4 cases in the Caribbean where the economies are both growing and developing. Tobago is coming last. If you had expertise in the THA, they would understand what I'm talking about. And then they would push us in that direction. None of that is to be found in there. Instead, you have this nonsense about 21 priorities. Now, Curtis is right when he talks about getting all the communities involved. but for a different reason than here. If you want to bring back agriculture, it has nothing to do with 2 mega farms. Those 2 mega farms will be businesses relying on the THA, and like all THA-owned businesses in Tobago, they too will fail. Trinidad and Tobago discovered that when they tried to do mega farms in Chagaramas, they never worked. They don't work because government is the worst practitioner of profit-making enterprise in the whole Caribbean, to say nothing of the world. If you're in America, you may get something like that to work if you have a military industrial complex. But if you're in the Caribbean, you're not going to get anywhere with 2 mega farms. That is not the answer. You have to build agriculture around the community development program. And that is where Tony is going down in the right direction, but none of that is evident in this stuff. And then to do any of that, you have to ask a couple of basic questions. First of all, how do you get people to leave the THA and go in and work in these industries? All the people, when I talk to them, I surveyed them for years. People are saying, we want to work in the government because we get security. Now, how do you induce them to leave? Okay, you're not likely to be able to do that, so what is your option? You're going to have to set up a program that attracts foreigners to come into Tobago, Trinidadians and other people from around the region and around the world, to come into Tobago, bring their enterprises, bring their workers, bring their high skills, and deal with the skill shortage that Curtis knows so well exists in Tobago. How do you do that with these kinds of programming that I see in this document that is completely ignorant of the fundamental problems that we have?
Let me just ask Curtis Williams, obviously has to leave, to make your last statement before you leave town, as it were. Curtis Williams. He seems to have left already. Has he gone, Charlo?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. He seems to have departed. Let me ask Renisi Prasad Singh. Sorry, before I ask him, just indicate to our listeners and viewers that we're talking about the proposed budget of the Tobago House of Assembly. You know how it works. House of Assembly proposes a budget, and then the government goes together, somewhere in October, it makes a determination about what the House of Assembly will get for what, and they take it from there. So that what is proposed now does not mean that it will be accepted and funded by the government of Trinidad. That's just how the system works. It's not. Years ago, there was talk about establishing a percentage. I'm sure that Dr. James knows about it. A percentage of the overall budget of Trinidad and Tobago for dedicated towards Tobago. I don't know if that still applies or that has gone out of the window. So we're talking about all of those things, and we're talking about the tourism industry also, and we have Renisi Prasad talking about that. Before we move on, Charlo, just let's take a break for a commercial, and we'll come back to the discussion in a moment. So Charles, you there? Okay, wonderful. So we are taking a break for the moment, and you can go ahead and make your statements, and then come back to this discussion.
Down in Chagaramas, big convention. They wanted to find suggestions to improve our production. Thousands of people were down there that time, but I just believe they went down there for old talk and line. If you don't believe the crew, so please don't doubt him at all. Trinidad and Tobago is the most productive country in the whole world. You may think I'm lying, but listen to me, and you'll hear some famous products we're producing recently. We produce over $50 billion in this country in 7 years. Then produce a one-track economy that collapse and leave us in tears. Then produce a corrupted crooks and scams that take all the money and gone. Well, tell me who in the world will beat us in this kind of production? No one in this whole world could produce like Trinidadians. Yes, we were the first to produce calypso, limbo, and pan. First to produce a pillow, first to produce roti. So you see they can't stop us with originality. It's we who gave the world the kind of carnival it knows today. You can get it now up in Notting Hill and in Brooklyn on Labor Day. But what we're producing in this place recently, it's rather amusing, but it's still productivity. We produce a man who take one set of money and hide it in Panama. Then produce a man who produce a law saying we can't bring the man back here. So he all over the world having fun cause he knows he cannot be caught. Cause before he leave, we produce the man with a diplomatic passport. This country producing famous people as well. You could remember Hayes, Crawford, Penny, or Claude Noel. But now we're producing destitutes everywhere. You can see them in San Fernando, Arima, or Woodford Square. The youths we're producing in our country, they just don't know what to do. There are menace now to society, man, they're robbing and raping too. This one make me happy. Friends, you must remember, we're producing more Rastafarians now than Jamaica. We produce a steel mill and all it's doing is stealing taxpayers' money. We produce a complex, it's so complex it might finish in the next century. We produce a highway that costs us $21 million per mile. Well, that, my friends, is productivity for you, Trinidadian style.
All right, everybody, and of course, we welcome you back to the Drive Time Exchange right here on New Era TT Radio, of course, with Tony Fraser. And remember, people, you can get us on newerattradio.com. And of course, you can pick us up on all of our social media platforms. And just to let you know also that during our morning show, you can check us out on M&E TV, which caters to all of the cable channels, Digicel, Flow, Tricor, so you can get us there between 6 and 8 a.m., all right? So, Tony, are you hearing me all right?
Charu, where did you pull that from? It tells me that you were listening carefully to the discussion.
Yeah, well, I'm listening and I'm trying to work out a little problem also. So.
Tobago, and interestingly, it comes from Tobago Crusoe, Osneil Bacchus. One crown that year was, I don't remember what year, but it must have been somewhere in the 90s or something like that. He emigrated after that, maybe, so that people would strangle him for what he said in the calypso. But I think it's so relevant to what we are talking about. He says that we are producing the wrong things and the wrong people, and what we are producing not taking us forward in any significant kind of way. Let me get our two panelists before I bring ready to talk about the tourism industry in specifics. Let me get your reaction, Renee and Dr. James, to Tobago Crusoe's analysis of the economic situation and the production capacity and output of the country.
I don't know if you were speaking about Tobago in particular or just Trinidad and Tobago. Because it simply applies in both cases.
Yes, definitely. It's an application to the country, not simply to Tobago. No, I mean it that way at all. And I'm sure that he did not mean it in that way. He's talking about the production, the human production, the quality of the human production, the things that we are producing and so on. And my position is that it's 25 plus years ago, still relevant to us, Dr. James.
Right. And provide some data to support what Crusoe was saying. If you measure productivity properly in Trinidad and Tobago, it declined by 23% between 2015 and 2024 under Rowley. And caused
what's the figure? 15%, you said?
It declined by 23%.
23%, sorry.
Under Rowley's stewardship, which is why the society ultimately had to turn against it. And in Tobago's case, over those same 15 years, it declined by 36% if we are to agree with Petal's numbers. And in Farley's 3.25 years, 3.5 years, it declined by 13.3%. So what you're dealing with is what Crusoe was singing about is what people felt at the time. Remember, this was just a couple of years after Abubakar tried his coup that he won his crown. So you're talking about Calypsonians as the real describers of the state of affairs and the crises we have to address.
Yeah, serious business that. But let me go back to Renee C. Prasad Singh to talk about the projections for growth and development in the tourism sector and all of the things that are required. I followed, covered tourism projects for a long time across the Caribbean and so on, and we've always talked about and heard about the potential for tourism and what is required and what has not been done over the period. Given what has been said in the budget statement of the THA, are you confident that the industry, the hoteliers, and all of the other people involved in the tourism industry in Tobago can move the industry forward?
Well, I mean, I first answer, do we really have a choice? The fact is, we have a reasonable amount of plant in Tobago that's not productive, that is there, that people have invested significant sums of money into, and they have to get a return on investment. If it's not for themselves, it's for the bank, and so forth. So, I mean, one, you have to make them productive. And the truth is, if I use Dr. James' point, the nature, I'm just surmising, but the nature of the programs does not match the productivity output. The truth is, that probably is a good way to look. Several years ago, there's a pity, I don't have the document before me now, but we would have done what was called a 3-year ruling plan. At that time, it was between the two administrations, Patrick Manning and the Pandey administration. And the basis of doing the 3-year ruling plan was really, in business terms, was to show a return on investment. Both those prime ministers basically said, listen, you guys talk about you want money to do this and do that, but what is going to be our output? How is this country of Trinidad and Tobago going to get a return, on this? And in doing so, we might have ended up with a variable, and I'm subject to correction, as I said, on the document. We would have been about 2.5% to 3% return on what we would have asked the government to give us. It ended up being just shy of about $300+ million was injected into the sector. And that made up a combination of marketing and promotion, grants, funding for development. Those around that time, coming out of that, you would have had Hilton and some of the other projects and so forth. But the challenge with that is that, like what happens a lot in this country, is that we would put things out and then we expect it to survive by inertia. It just continues. And then we say, okay, well, we fix that. So let's forget about that. It's like agriculture. I suppose in agriculture is doing really well. We say, okay, good. So let's not worry about it. And then, of course, your productivity fell. The point I'm making is that you have to, it is reasonable for any citizen like Dr. James to say, listen, if we're going to take taxpayers' money and put it in the sector, what is going to be the return? Because it's his money, it's my money. We are paying taxes, right? We want to see what is going to be the return and what is going to be the growth. And I am certainly happy that THA has gotten the funding to carry the budget through until the end of the fiscal, and then we expect beyond. But just investing money, it doesn't mean that the industry is going to find itself in a sustainable or growth path. This is a bit of a mistake that we make. Sometimes it may be.
So what is required, Rene, for that sustainable growth that you're talking about?
Well, Dr. James had said it. The truth is, you do also have to know where you're going and you have to have a plan. And I started off by saying that. Now, I don't like to make things too difficult. I tell people this is not rocket science. The truth is, you know what the product is in Tobago. You may have to do an audit again, yes. But we generally have very village community, small product. Yes, we have what we call large hotels, but they're really not large in the scheme of when one compares to the rest of the region. We have a lot of components of a tourism sector that are reaching maturity, that are very attractive, that are very different. And one of if you want to look at the positive out of a negative, because the industry has declined so significantly, we are basically, it's almost the only ways up. Now, he mentioned some examples, and I added St. Lucia. I didn't have the mic on, but you look at some destinations and realize that the mass tourism, or the cheap and cheerful, as we call it, tourism, doesn't work at destinations our size. We don't have really carrying capacity for this type of tourist. So if you're getting a higher yield tourist, it requires an investment that matches that. So 150 million, in fact, the secretary asking the Hotel Association just to give a figure, understanding that it's just out of a hat. And I said, listen, being a hotelier, we really don't think in TT dollars, right? We have to think generally in USD because we trade generally in USD dollars with our foreign travel. 200 to 250 million US dollars is not unreasonable to get this industry going. Now, before anybody gets concerned, we're not saying that the government has to find that money, but it has to be a combination of investment. It will be state, private sector, and other investors, which is just basically what 1.2 billion TC dollars, which is nothing. Because when you compare, and Dr. James mentioned the countries, and I was very familiar because those days I was very active as president of the Hotel Association, the Bahamas. When Bahamas only had Paradise Island for many, many years, and Nassau and just a few, what did they do? They actually bulldozed the entire area to rebuild an entire location for tourism because they had to pivot. They would have actually reinvigorated strips of areas. Puerto Rico did it. Barbados, when they had it from the Gold Coast to the Platinum Coast. Sometimes it's going to take a bit of a monumental change to really change the direction of your industry. We have started it by default because we have built a humongous airport. The jury's out of whether or not it was an appropriate size today, etc. But the point is it exists and it sits on the destination. So the investment has to be one. We spoke about the money, fine. You have to put together a plan. Now, this plan doesn't have to be a complete academic plan that requires Harvard to bless it. But the truth is, you do need to have some strategy. And I know the point, and I'm not going to comment on the 21 points that is above my pay grade. But the truth is, Dr. James is correct in the sense that you can't shoot at so many areas without trying to sustain and gain from the areas that are probably the ones that will convert first, generate income, and then move on. And the truth is, for our sector alone, I'm talking about tourism, that's the same thing. If you're looking at the cultural side of Tobago, you look at the nature side of Tobago, those are the obvious ones. They are there, they're easy. The Trinidad market, very sustainable, very consistent. And of course, the tourist market, the traditional tourist market, the Europeans who still, by and large, are the travelers to Tobago. But then you also have to now disaggregate what type of European, because there are Europeans that will come, spend money, it's happening in Tobago currently. They're staying and we're basically getting little or no return, because the caliber of tourists that are staying on the island is not leaving the type of funding that we need. Then we have to also look at the service side of it, which is a combination of Tobagonians and bringing in labor and talent from outside of Trinidad and Tobago. If that's what has to be done initially, it has to be done, because you have to provide the service and you have to give the product. If you want to charge money and expect deliverables, you have to deliver. And those things have to be looked at. And I don't think you have to reinvent and wait 10 years to retrain all of Tobago. I'm not that pessimistic about it. But I think if we need to start and head that way, have a program, create a marketing plan that at least has a medium to longer term view. Because tourism plans, you cannot write it and keep it there for 10 years. No sector, no tourism industry has ever operated that way. That is why we created a 3-year rolling plan, because we use the window of about 3 years. And rolling is a word used because it does roll. Things change and you have to be able to adapt. It's a living and breathing document. I think if you take at least that view, you can see the industry changing. Because just quickly, Trinidad, which is not traditionally seen as a tourist destination, has seen growth with very little promotion and marketing. Trinidad has become attractive to a lot of visitors. Trinidad has a lot to offer.
So, Rene, when you said that a moment ago about the need for foreign exchange to come into the industry, and I thought that what do you do, or what do you want out of the Trinidad visitor to Tobago, sharing in Tobago, the country of Trinidad and Tobago, who does not have foreign exchange or does not want to spend his foreign exchange? Is it that kind of person is not welcomed in the industry in Tobago?
No, absolutely not. And in fact, I never insinuated that at all. In fact, I said Trinidad is a critical...
No, I didn't say you intimated that. No.
But I think it's a blessing, because we can get the best of both worlds. We simply want the foreign exchange. It's obvious, because Trinidad and Tobago needs the foreign exchange. I don't think any one of us will argue our declining energy sector and so forth. So one, you definitely want to grow that market. But you have to remember that no foreign traveler, it's not year-round. I mean, it's seasonal, right? Even in the region. So you're not always going, 365 days a year, you're not going to be running 60-80% of foreigners, because that's what the world doesn't operate that way travel. But Trinidadians have always been consistent. So a weekend, some of the trough periods where traditional UK travel, you get the Trinidad business. So we want to ensure that we maintain and sustain both of those markets. And I tell you something, when we say the word Trinidad or Trinbagonian, you have to remember that we are about 4th generation. So while your grandchild, or while if you were living abroad, Tony, you would come and you would stay with mom or granny. Your grandchildren are coming to visit you, and they might stay one day by Uncle Vanus just to please him, but they want to stay in a hotel. And they don't only want you to carry them down the road. They're going on tours. They want to experience the restaurants. They're coming for carnival. They're coming for all kinds of things. So our diaspora, that's a market we call diaspora, is a huge market. And in fact, let's let you know, Trinidad's fastest growing segment that is spending foreign exchange is actually the diaspora market. People who have a connection to Trinidad and Tobago that are coming home now because they want to take the person in the office who only hear about you talking about how lovely Trinidad and Tobago is, and other people who are coming with them, and they themselves who are 3rd and 4th generation. So that is actually a foreign exchange market as well. So although we see Trinidad, because we relate it, the Trinidad market is not always the person spending TT dollars. And even if they're spending the TT dollars, we welcome it. Because when they come to Tobago, they go in the supermarket, they go to the restaurants. It is still economic expenditure.
Well, so what I was trying to get at, Rene, for you to comment on is there obviously has to be allocation of foreign dollars, the foreign import export tourists, and the local tourists. And I must presume that there is a place for the TT dollar to go in the whole tourism industry in Tobago. A location for it, a place for it.
When you say location, are you mean a physical location or?
No, I mean a part of the industry.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I mean, you remember Trinidad itself has different stratas of people that spend. Huh? You have persons that will go and will stay in the guest houses, will stay in the bed and breakfast. People will stay in the smaller homes. There's a market, and it'll always be a market because people's economic bracket changes. When I was 16 and 17, I don't have no money, but I come into Tobago and it's me and 10 partners staying in a place, right? Now I'm older and things have improved in my life. Now I will probably look at higher in a hotel or stay in a villa. So, and then you have the Trinbagonians and themselves have also bought property in Tobago. So we have all the different tiers of markets for the Trinidad. So, and they commingle. In fact, like if you got sandals, a good example, or that type of product in some of the other Caribbean islands, Grenada, for example. There are a lot of Trinidadians that are going to those destinations, and they are spending their money no differently to a British person. And in fact, Trinidadians actually pay others maybe in TT dollars many times more money because they're staying on short, even though they're staying on shorter stays, they are very used to spending money, dining out and so forth. So I think they could commingle. Tobago is perfect to have a market of both a mixture of Trinidad visitors, CARICOM visitors. In fact, today we actually had a meeting with the Guyana Hotel Association, our association. And we were actually talking about collaborating with Guyana for some of the eco-tourists. So I think that we don't talk about a lot is the demand and interest from our Caribbean brothers and sisters. There are a lot of people traveling from Guyana, from Barbados, from Grenada to Trinidad and Tobago.
What do they pay? The people who come from the Caribbean. What do they pay in? What kind of currency?
Well, US because US. US. Yeah.
Let me ask Dr. James, and I know he has talked about extensively on this program and elsewhere about the service industry or service as an element of the tourism product in Tobago. Is there room for the bed and breakfast, the people who come to go to the beach, etc., go to some festival here and so on? Can they both coexist in the same place, i.e. in Tobago?
They can, of course. That's what Renee is saying already. They can, and one has to understand how. But I want to take a moment to clarify what it means to develop the tourism economy of Tobago, using the examples of the work we're currently doing, myself and a team of specialists in the Eastern Caribbean, where the economies are geographically similar to Tobago, but they are doing 5 times as well as Tobago in the context of beach tourism. They brought us into the UN brought us in there to deal with that very problem, that they are in that mood, but they're stagnant. They're not developing, they're growing, and they want to develop. And they want to catch up with St. Kitts. And even Antigua is behind St. Kitts in that sense, because they're not doing the right thing. What Renee was talking about with the Bahamas is the first place to look for a proper example of what is to be done and how. What the Bahamas really did wasn't simply to develop the beach tourism capabilities. They did that too with Paradise and all of the bringing Atlantis and all of those things. That's all fine. But they did something 30 years ago which created the fruit they are enjoying today. They spent $5-10 billion moving into financial services. And it is those services that transform their economy. So today, they are generating $31,000 per person per year. Right? Now, they're doing that because the platform on which they are really transforming into is they're selling legal services to develop their financial services. And when you want to buy legal services to develop a financial portfolio, you have to go in the Bahamas and spend 4 months. You can't go a weekend. You can't develop your portfolio that way. You have to buy accounting services. You have to buy portfolio design services. So those customers who are delivering or enjoying the financial services, buying those services, come there and spend long periods of time. That's the anchor on which they are transforming what is a beautiful archipelagic tourism plans. Right? They could rent a whole island to a billionaire who would go there and set up a house and live there forever. That is the kind of tourism they can do because of the archipelagic quality. But they didn't rest on archipelagic visitations. What they did was to go down the road of the financial services and bring the whole world in there to develop that. They brought in PricewaterhouseCoopers and other top accounting firms, top legal firms, top portfolio design firms from around the world with all their expert workers, transform the basis of their economy. And that is how they get to the 31,000. And when you model their economy, as I have been doing for the UN, you see them not only growing, but developing in the sense that they are converging towards the US economy in a way we dreamed of in 2030, in the Vision 2030 program, but none of it has materialized. Now, if you look in St. Kitts Nevis, they're doing exactly the same thing, bringing the whole world in there to put together their 4 university consortia. Top professors from around the world, and the visitors who are coming are not just people coming to go to the beach. These are people coming to school. If you look in France, you see the same thing. If you look in Britain, you see the same thing. The anchor of the American tourism industry is students coming from China and India and all them places to Harvard, and then they bring their family to visit them. That is the story of real tourism that you have to talk about. And St. Kitts Nevis had gone down that, and they are now producing $21,000 US per person. Trinidad and Tobago, with all the oil and is now at 14,491. What I'm trying to tell you is you have to bring the world in. We didn't get oil and gas from Trinidad and Tobago's capabilities. We brought in the world to build our oil and gas industry. But you can't just do it for oil and gas because that is vulnerable to the random shocks of oil prices. So you've got to go down the road of the service activities. Now, what we're doing in the Eastern Caribbean, here's what we're doing. The Eastern Caribbean countries want to bring medical tourism. So I got a team of medical.
Sorry, Dr. James, let me ask you something before you go on to the medical tourism. And I will remember it and you remember it to come back to that. But I want to talk, to ask you if the financial tourism that you're talking about today is different from the financial tourism of yesterday, the tax havens and so on, which were in, Cayman Islands, spread over, and the Americans and the Europeans got in and stopped that thing. So what you're talking about now today is very different from that. I just wanted you to clarify that point.
That's correct. And if you look carefully, if you know what you're looking at, you will not see Cayman and Bermuda or the Bahamas as mere tax havens. That's not what they are. They are producers of financial services beyond the fact that you could come and register your business. And there's no value added in registering a business.
Hide your money for a little while and so on.
The financial services, the legal services, the accounting services, these are high-skilled, driven, high-knowledge, high-value-added industries. That's what you're talking about. And the reason Cayman and Bermuda were able to deal with the tax haven story is they got the protection of the British. But the Bahamas don't have no protection from the British, and that's where they're going down the road with their financial services. And you don't need no protection from the British to establish a consortium university in a set of universities in St. Kitts Nevis to grow your GDP without dependence on oil and gas, or without the shocks of oil and gas. And Grenada was going down that road, and they got stalled with what they're doing. But my point to you is, with respect to the medical tourism, here's what we're designing, just to show you the principle. We're bringing the world in to invest, because you have to bring international medical capability in. Medical in the sense of doctor, medical in the sense of nurse. You've got to bring international high-level capability that the world could trust what you're doing. And we're developing a program that is anchored on the communities. This is a team of medical doctors that I'm working with. And what we're doing is we're saying, look, if you have a community that is able to set up the community-based enterprise, people can come in the community, they can be made safe. So you have to have safe communities. You can't just have people come and then they walk down the road and you're being mugged.
Somebody kill them.
Yeah. Exactly. You want safe communities. The health programs they are talking about are targeted. They're targeted to 40-something-year-olds and above, where people they have their incomes, but they have non-communicable diseases like diabetes and high pressure and obesity and all these things. And you bring a team of medical expertise into the agenda to design those solutions, research-based, tied back to the rest of you. What your diet has to be, what your exercise routine has to be, under medical care with expert trainers and so on. You have to reform the community with facilities like walking trails, trails into the mountains. One of the pieces of research that I was exposed to. I mean, I grew up on the sports ground. And what they were saying is, walking around a sports track is very different to living in a community where you have to walk up the hill, walk down the hill, walk barefoot. All those kinds of things are what they are integrating into a package that 40-something-year-olds and others could come in and buy, because they're worried about their diabetes and the high pressure and the obesity. And they have deep problems with them. They can't lose weight and all of that. You could put that package together, and we're distributing that package across the Eastern Caribbean, the 6 main states. So you could, and the experts are designing where those specializations are. Well, now you can't just do that. What you have to also do is a second component for a program. And if you look in Malta, you see it there. What you're doing is, you know, building on their citizen by investment program and expanding that. And you're creating in the communities accelerators and incubators to support business development. And in that context, what you're doing is, you're saying to a foreign startup, come into St. Kitts, come into St. Lucia, as the case might be. We have a CARICOM environment for you. You could experiment with your products in this environment. Come in, bring your workers. If your business could survive for 5 years, you could become citizen. So it's no longer just if you buy your citizenship. Come with your business, bring the workers, bring your family. We put you in a safe, healthy, happy community. Happiness is a big part of the longevity you're looking for as a businessman anyway. So come in. We provide you tax facilities, tax saving facilities, similar to what people talk about when you talk about tax havens. We provide you that if you could survive and grow. You pay those fees we charge as government, like in the Bahamas, or not in the Bahamas, like in Cayman Islands, they don't tax you. They charge you fees for government services and so on. So you pay those if you have to, and we give you space, we give you incubator support, we give you accelerator support, we stretch that out as long as is required, and we help you with your marketing of your product from an experimental standpoint. And if you could survive in St. Lucia for 10 years with that, then not only do you get the citizenship and so on to anchor what you're doing here, but you also remember getting access to the whole Western Hemisphere market. So we're designing something like what Malta has, combining that with something like what you have in St. Kitts Nevis, and do that for education, for healthcare, and other areas. Bahamas and them doing it for financial services. That is how you industrialize tourism. You can't do it with local Tobago capabilities alone. You have to bring the whole world into Tobago. None of that is evident in this body of work that you see.
I have a question for you on that. You just touched on it right at the end about the specialist capacity of Tobago, of all of the Caribbean to meet the requirements of that kind of tourism. But let me go to Renee first to talk about, it's a different kind of tourism that Dr. James is talking about. Your reflection on that as somebody in the middle of it, the academics, the researchers and so on could talk the talk, right? But you in the middle of it, how does that strike you? Is it possible to develop in that kind of area, that kind of tourism?
Absolutely. In fact, I don't actually look at what Dr. James is saying as academic. In fact, he's actually shown examples. So it's in practice. It's just not in practice in the most obvious sense where we are. And in fact, some of the benefit of his academia is that he has the numbers and he has some of the facts, which is useful. That's what you want. And I can tell you something. I fully support what he's saying in the sense that those are areas of tourism development that can create sustainability. Because you have a variety of tourists. You have tourists that come and they'll come for their 2 weeks. They may return, of course, but you also want, subject to that, I mentioned earlier, there's troughs, right? So when you have someone that comes, and in fact, we use the word medical tourism, but I'd like to add it to really be medical and health tourism. Because the health aspect is really those people that convalesce, those persons that stay for nowadays. Mental health is a big issue. People come for spiritual, all of that. So it may not necessarily be the medical in the sense of when we're in a medical ward where you have a doctor supervising you, right? That's a real part of the world. Tobago, because it's topography, and I would add Trinidad as well, because there are a lot of beautiful areas, mountainous areas, and so forth. You have a lot of persons who are spending money. We're talking about tens of thousands of US dollars to come and live in a little outhouse, for lack of a better word, just for that type of recovery. It exists. So what he's saying is absolutely not academic. It actually exists. We just have not capitalized on it in the way we could. Although I might add, and I'll give you a good example, because you mentioned Tobago, for example, has quite a significant amount of villas. Now, there's a big debate about the fact that a lot of people are buying these properties and the money is not sitting in the destination. Well, yes and no, because I mean, you would have had to pay your land tax and so forth. But the point is, that's only systems that need to put in place to capture the revenue. You could do a licensing system. You could do an annual. If you're non-resident, you pay $100,000 US dollars initial fee towards. There are a lot of creative ways to do this. But when those persons stay on the island, they are contributing, and they're contributing on several points that Dr. James made. One, spending money, of course, is important. We all want the funding. But there can be an academic like him who decides to spend 6 months in Tobago in the winter. And that same person could come at the same university that he's referring to and give up the time. Many times they volunteer. They can do research. Grenada is another example where you have the medical university that contributes significantly. In fact, some of Grenada's US airlift became a reality because of the university, and now tourists use it. So it's a synergy. Yachting, for example, Bahamas is very famous. We have had for years, we talk about having yachting facilities. And I'll give you a quick example, Tony. I was in Chaguaramas very recently. My daughter she was invited to go down the islands. And while waiting for the boat, we saw a gentleman, what we call a foreigner. And we said, hey, so, where are you from? Well, he's from North Canada. Oh, so what are you doing here? Well, actually, this is my third time I've been here, and I normally stay for 5 months. Oh, really? So I was kind of curious, He tell me the size of his yacht, his boat, 40 foot, etc., etc. I said, so, but you look kind of young, though. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, what do you do? He said, well, thanks for the compliment. I'm actually just in my 60s now. He said, listen, I invested my money. I do stocks and trading and all of that. And I'm making enough return to travel down to the islands. So I said, so what are you doing in Trinidad exactly? He said, well, no, look, I'm enjoying Trinidad, but I'm also doing boat repairs. And when I went around that dockyard alone, and I saw the amount of boats that are harbored for repairs in Trinidad. That is a huge industry where you're getting hard currency. And I asked him, I said, well, why do you choose Trinidad? I said, I know we kind of south of the hurricane belt. He said, yeah, but that of course is important. He said, but listen, the quality of work is very good. And when we compare the prices, it's very good. So those are another linkages. And he's going to the restaurant there and spending money. He's going to do. And in fact, he asked me about Tobago because he said he never had an opportunity. So I gave him number and so I said, well, come to Tobago, spend 3 days and so forth and see what Tobago is like. So all of those things that Dr. James is talking about are the benefits and the other areas that we can develop easily that will be complementary to the type of tourism we have. There's room for all of that. And Trinidad and Tobago is actually perfect for that because Trinidad has excellent sporting facilities. They're talking medical tourism. Trinidad, unlike majority of Caribbean destinations, has decent, I know some people may debate, but we have fairly decent public health services, but we have a lot of private health facilities. And there are lots of people that will come and use them and still come to Tobago as well to convalesce, to spend time, and all of that. So we have already started it. I think the issue is that we already have not honed in on it, and we have not put it in a policy and focus on it the way he's referring to.
Right.
And by the way, we have the IFC, investment banking.
I would put this thing the other way around than Rennie. I wouldn't have my capital services as complements. They would be the anchors of the short stay tourism.
Right.
Because they are the long stay part.
Right.
Right? And then people will come to visit for a week, 2 weeks, and so on.
Yeah,
so the short stay part will be what you come from Trinidad to visit for a weekend and so on. All that, right. But the anchor of the development of the economy is the long stay.
Yeah, well, we agree on that. That's the same thing I'm saying because you really want the best of both worlds, which you could have.
And Rennie, my question to you is that is head knowledge amongst, I presume, I don't know how widespread it is. It's head knowledge amongst hoteliers and people in the industry and so on, but implementation is a different kind of story. And is there any movement towards not eliminating the hotel tourism as that exists now and has existed for a long time, I think, the beach and the sun and so on. But is there any understanding and appreciation that the tourism product has to move from there to another place?
I mean, it is known, but whether or not the implementation side of it has been 50-50 talk, 50% implement, maybe not as implementation, because, for example, Shagaramas has been spoken about the previous administration. We have just had a recent government change in Trinidad, but that was, there are actually documents, there are plans to do that, but in terms of actually actualizing it, that's where we have not yet gone over the threshold. And I think these type of forums, when we have these type of conversations, we are the ones, the practitioners, both academic and persons in the public sector, that have to come together to see it happen and to make it a reality. And I think that's where we are.
Let me ask. Let me help you just address the implementation story.
Right. Okay.
What we're doing programming in the Eastern Caribbean is empowering the communities to become the entrepreneurs. Kind of like what Castar is doing. And what they say they want to be able to do. Yeah. If they had the power as a community to organize what they do, then they told me they would generate 20 times the amount of money they're generating now. Okay. So that's the same thing we're saying. You empower the communities. They are that's the third leg of entrepreneurship. Yeah. The private sector is one leg. The communities will be a major leg, and they'll do far better than any THA or any central government.
Yeah, think for private sector.
Yeah, and they support the private sector, of course. And they're everyday focused on developing the community capacity to do this kind of incubation and acceleration and safe, healthy, happy supply of services and so on. It has to be, if they get yourself started down this road, in the case of the Eastern Caribbean and Tobago, is about community empowerment to start.
Correct.
But before you end your program, we need to come back to that $63.5 million request.
Okay, but just before we do that, I want to ask you, James, Dr. James, where are the skills for the kind of tourism that you're talking about, medical, financial, legal, etc., etc., going to come from? And I ask that in the context that if we are going to import all of those skills to the region, we might be facing a real difficulty in that what will happen is that the gains we make will flow out to pay for those services. So do we have that kind of capacity?
Yeah, well, be careful of the phobia there, because if you look in the world, any economy that has developed, anyone, including the Western economy, none of them developed on the basis of local capability alone. China, for example, Japan, and so
Yes.
the crucial thing that you have to do is generate the value added on the conditions in which the investors want to live and stay in your country. That's what China is achieving. That's what the Americans achieved. That's what the British achieved. They stole the whole world and took to their homes. It's never going to be that you're going to turn Tobago into any developed society based on the people who are here now. That's not going to work. You have to bring people in on terms that allow them to become part of the society.
Right. And I am not. Yeah, I am not afraid of the outsiders, quote unquote, coming in. I am asking if in the balance of bringing in people who provide these services at a cost, of course, is there going to be sufficient left back for development of the industry and Tobago?
I think so. I think the answer is yes to that, and you have a lot of evidence of that. If you look at how the US developed with what they call the migrant society.
Yeah, hospitality is on the backs of them.
Yeah, white people are now about 60% when they used to be 100% after they stole the whole continent from the Indians. But Central Americans moved in, Italians came in, people just moved into the society and shared in creating a new society. There's not going to be a Tobago-based place where only Tobagonians historically live in here. You have to allow Trinidadians to come into the space, and you create a new society. That's you see it in Japan. They are the slowest at it, but they're doing it. You see it in China. They are also slow at it, but they're doing it. If you look in the Philippines, which I'm studying for the UN now, you're seeing it. It is that you have to rebuild the society around different skills, different ethos, different sense of belonging and owning, and so on. You have to incorporate that into a new hybrid society. That's Western civilization. That's what you're seeing coming out in the ASEAN. That's what you're seeing in China.
I don't think it's going to be to the level where it's going to be an issue of people being xenophobic and worrying about a mass. Because one of the benefits, again, of Trinidad and Tobago is that between the two destinations, you have a lot of skill, to coexist and benefit from
they leave. Remember that by and large, people leave.
Yeah.
The majority of our high-skilled trained people.
Yeah, of course. They return too.
Leave because the society is not developing, and they go abroad where they can.
So in other words, we can draw on the skills from the diaspora abroad, in addition, of course, to the specialists, quote unquote, foreigners coming in and so on. I want to divide the rest of the time between Rene and Dr. James. Rene, the question is, and Dr. James wanted to go back to the 63%, I think he said, and we're going to allow him to finish on that score. But Rene, what of the talk of sandals or some other possibility? Has that died with the last government, or is that still an option being talked about and being conceived of?
Well, I mean, standards specifically, I believe the Chief Secretary would have mentioned a day or two ago that they're still waiting for a proposal. I would imagine the last time a discussion was held with the government, that was where the discussion was left. But I mean, standards aside, the truth is the destination does require investment. Unless you bring investment into the destination, you're going to remain stagnant. You're going to remain the same way. Now, to me, it's twofold. You need new investment. It doesn't always have to be on a large scale. So it doesn't always have to be a large resort. It could be a combination of things, because investment is investment, whether it be a furtherance of, like Dr. James mentioned, of a Castara concept, plus development of one or two resorts. The reason why some of the larger properties are useful in particular is because, of course, sustainability of airlift and so forth, it helps. So in general, yes, we need investment in the destination. There's no doubt about it. It doesn't only have to be sandals, but I mean, of course, sandals it's a Caribbean brand, and it's the way we look at it, it's just one of many options of developing investment on the destination of Trinidad and Tobago. You need it.
And my question is that still being talked about? Meaning, when I say sandals is representative of all of the other big chains coming in. Has that talk died, or is there still a possibility for it to be conceived of seriously?
No, I don't think it has died at all. In fact, I think even in the budget statement, there are, besides them, there are other investors currently interested in Tobago. So no, it hasn't died at all. Those are open, and in fact, I'll make a little bit of plug. I know Dr. James will be aware of it, but the Hotel Association on the 24th of July is going to have its first forum, which is a stakeholder forum, really, with the tagline "Tourism is the new fuel," because we feel that there needs to be an overall review. And Dr. James had mentioned it earlier, which I felt was important, that you also have to have a review of where we came from to know where we're going as well. So we're also looking at that, and also looking to sensitize the stakeholders in Trinidad, the government, private sector stakeholders, investors, to the serious nature and the potential of tourism in Tobago. So we'll be doing something on the 24th of July in Tobago. First ever time we're going to do that. We have people from some of the other destinations, international, and of course persons like Dr. James and so forth, speaking. So that really is testament to the fact that yes, investment of that type is still on the table, and we definitely want to see it.
Yeah, and is the human resource being prepared, trained, conscientized for that kind of service to the industry?
It's being developed. I don't think as fast as it could be. I mean, we certainly have our shortfalls. We have competition, as was mentioned earlier, from THA, etc., other areas where people, to attract them back in the industry. But I think there's certainly availability of some of the labor that we need to develop the sector in Tobago within the borders of Trinidad and Tobago, even without having to go outside, at least to start and get it going there. But there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in terms of providing the particular technical skills. But in the private sector, there are a lot of people doing training and stuff too. So it's work in progress, and it's something we definitely have to look at. Without a doubt, human resources is something that we have to put more emphasis on.
Yeah. Dr. James wanted to go back to one of the statements in the budget. Go ahead, Dr. James.
Well, let me just weigh in on this sandals business just before I do that.
Okay, sure.
Because I think the sandals thing is a pipe dream. If you look in our history, you will see Magdalena was Hilton. That didn't survive. There is no guarantee that you'll get much gains from the sandals. Jamaica has the most sandals and breezes and all of those invented. The whole all-inclusive stuff was invented in Jamaica when I was an economist there. And I can tell you, it has not produced any development in Jamaica. Because so long as you don't anchor the industry on the capital services, like what the Bahamas and St. Kitts and them are doing, sooner or later you'll run up against the fact that people come into your space for 2 and 3 and 5 and days and so on. They'll be buying services that are low value added services. Hotel services by nature are low value added services. You pay for the room care, you pay for keeping the grounds. These are low value added services. So you can't develop on that basis. You've got to do the other things that St. Kitts, Nevis and the Bahamas and the Mandeville. And the reason we are doing the work we're doing in the Eastern Caribbean now is because they went down the sandals and they still find themselves, they reach a peak, 11, 12,000 US dollars per person, and the citizens were not happy. So that's not the way to go. You do that as well. And let me just remind
I just want to add that. I don't think that's a silver bullet, and it's a fair point. It cannot be that sandals is a savior or that type of investment.
Can I just remind you and Rennie that we have a lot of potential investors in Trinidad right there. And in Guyana, you don't need to be saying nothing but no sandals.
No, I said
Anybody
that.
who wants to come to Tobago to invest, open up the space, let them come. Don't talk
Correct.
no nonsense about Calcutta ship and all them stupidness when you want to open up an economy. You gotta let people come into this space and invest.
Absolutely. I
Italians
said the same thing.
want to come to Tobago and feel as though they are part of the thing. Allow
Okay.
You have a space right here to allow it to happen.
Yeah.
But I want to remind you that this
Yes.
business of $63.5 billion of spending by Cameron's government is also a pipe dream, isn't it? This is a collapsed economy. Where will she find the 63.5 million from? You are likely to get about 35 to 40 at most $billion of tax revenues in this collapsed economy. And if that is your situation, especially given the fact that you have closed the TTRA, what you will find is that you have a lot of businesses, small, medium businesses, who you have to give amnesty to in order to be able to survive the crunch that they are operating under now. I own a business, and I could tell you, if I paid up all my taxes on time, I'd have to close my business. So I'm waiting on them to offer the amnesty so that I can allow my business located in Trinidad to stay afloat rather than send home people. So that's one thing. That means you have to, if you're going for 63.5 billion, wherever they got that figure from, you're going to be talking about $23 billion of deficit financing. Right? Now, if you read the THA budget, they're not recognizing that, and they're not paying attention to the fact that the THA itself has to put in the budget where the funds will come from. So if you're getting 3.71 billion, how much of that will be deficit financing by the central government? And if you are going to borrow, as the law allows the THA to borrow, why is that not present and accounted for in the budget layout? Because you can borrow on overdrafts. I don't see any sign of that accounted for in the document. You can borrow if the minister allows you to. Why is that not accounted for? Why should we not know as citizens how much debt we are going to go into to implement these 21 development priorities that the government has? In other words, I can't fund development for Tobago. And you need to tell me how much of the development financing will come from the development bank that you are calling a development fund. All of that is not accounted for. So this is just an incompetently done budget that the people of Tobago will get nothing from, just as we have gotten nothing from all the incompetent budgets under the PNN because of the way we're building the budgets. This is our executive council budget. It's not a budget prepared by the people of Tobago in consultation with us. All of us don't get to go in and participate. You know, the THA might talk to the chamber, but the Tobago economy involves the communities too. What do they want to do? It's not present in the conversation. So this is...
Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. We believe it or not, after 2 hours, we run out of time and we still have so much more to discuss. But we want to thank you for being with us, Dr. Vanas James, economist, and of course, Rennie Sipasad Singh, businessman, hotelier. And earlier on, we had Curtis Williams, who had to leave to go to a big meeting, he told me. The business chamber in Tobago, and we're talking about exploring really all kinds of possibilities going forward. Just a point of programming for tomorrow in this space. We're going to tackle this business of the stand your ground legislation, and we have some people involved in a trainer. We have an attorney who has looked at it and so on, and we have a businessman to talk about it. So it should be interesting and exciting. Thank you again, gentlemen, for being here and participating.
Thanks for the partnership.
Right.
Thanks.
And Sir Charles, Over to you, man.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you very much, gentlemen, for being on the program today. This has been our Drive Time Exchange with Tony Fraser. Of course, you get the repeat of the program tomorrow morning on New Era, ttradio.com at around 8:20 a.m.
Were down there that time, but I just believe they went down there for old talk and line. If you don't believe the Crusoe, well, please don't doubt him at all. Trinidad and Tobago is the most productive country in the whole world. You may think I'm lying, but listen to me, and you'll hear some famous products we're producing recently. We produce over $50 billion in this country in 7 years. Then produce a one-track economy that collapse and leave us in tears. Then produce a corrupted crooks and scams that take all the money and gone. Well, tell me who in the world will beat us in this kind of production? No one in this whole world could produce like Trinidadians. Yes, we were the first to produce calypso, limbo, and pan. First to produce a pillow, first to produce roti. So you see they can't stop us with originality. It's we who gave the world the kind of carnival it knows today. You can get it now up in Notting Hill and in Brooklyn on Labor Day. But what we're producing in this place recently, it's rather amusing, but it's still productivity. We produce a man who take one set of money and hide it in Panama. Then produce a man who produce a law saying we can't bring the man back here. So he all over the world having fun cause he knows he cannot be caught. Cause before he leave, we produce the man with a diplomatic passport.